Greetings, I am Pillar Nexus Danger Gladiator, and this is a very special episode of Pillar Loves Tabletop Games. I'll be making a very special playlist just for the post tier list episodes called Pillar Loves Tabletop Games Unlimited. And this will be the first entry, a little game called Planet Steam. The goal of the game is to end it with the most money. Nice little money tokens, but I wish they made more than ones. Anyway, you'll have money at the end based on the money you still have in your personal collection. Every zone you have is worth 25. A zone with a tank is worth 50 together, because it's 25 for the zone and 25 for the tank. And then a tank with a supercharger on it adds an extra 50. So that zone is worth 100. You'll have luxury quarters. If you create them, they're worth an extra 50 for each one. There's a limited number in the game, so if you can build one, might as well. But those cost resources, and you'll get money for whatever resources you still have based on their current market value. So at the start of the game, you'll have some starter zones, there'll be empty zones, and there'll be neutral zones. Getting an empty zone comes from the zone auction, or from claiming a zone later. The only way to take a neutral is to have a building license, or when the auction zone step happens, if only the neutral zones are left, then those get put up for auction. So the way this game will work is, at the start you'll have money based on the number of players. You'll have some starting resources based on the number of players. So a critical thing to keep in mind with resources is you have airships that have a limited capacity. At the start of the game, you can upgrade one of them to carry more stuff. Further upgrades require paying the cost, which we'll get into during the turn sequence. So what will happen so you have your starting money, your starting resources. You'll need a set of cards based on how many players. So 2 players, the condensed rolls. And then we'll go to the first turn. So first turn of the game, we will take one of each resource available from the supply and add it to those resources. By winning an auction, you'll be able to take one of them, and by winning an auction, you'll also have first pick of which roll card you want. So starting with the first player and going around, players will bid for the right to take for first pick of roll cards. The rolls include Lady's Steam, which gives you the starting player, Airship Captain, which lets you place a support airship, which lets you, wherever it is, it produces, each steam tank will produce extra. The Venturer, which lets you auction an unclaimed zone. But if you win, you only have to pay half the cost, round up. And the Engineer, which is take a building license, or 15 credits from the reserve. At 5 players, it adds the Bank Agent, which I believe lets you take a resource. Anyway. So once the auction's So once an auction is done, the player takes the card of their choice. If there's only one player left, I believe the absolute minimum they have to pay is should be, I think, one, either one or two. At least one credit. But yeah. Of course, we're starting with the bonus resources. Your carrier limit still applies. So if you can't take it, then you're basically screwed out of it. Or I think it either stays there or it gets discarded. Let me double check. It has been quite a while since I last played this game, and there we go. Bonus resource. Let's return the resource to reserve and adjust the supply. Yeah. So yeah. And then everyone will have their roles, and then we'll go to auction the zone. And then you'll get to claim a zone. In order to claim a zone, you'll place your token, but then you'll have to roll. And if you don't roll high enough, you'll end up having that zone. Your token will get moved somewhere else. I believe based on the same column or row. But what you want to do zone-wise is try to gather zones together orthogonally so you can set up synergy better. Yeah, if you roll a 4, 5, or 6, you're fine. If you roll a 1, 2, or 3, then you place it on the closest unclaimed zone from the chosen zone in any orthogonal direction. And if there are no unclaimed zones, then the player gets 15 credits instead. After a player rolls a die, they're committed to placing the claim marker that way. But again, you have the option to use a building license instead. And take out a neutral, just place it wherever. But then the license is out of the game. There's an opportunity later to sell your building license for money when it's like not as useful, or if you're just that desperate. Oh, one other thing, just as a failsafe in case you screw yourself out of money. Before the start of the auction step, a player with 0 money gets $2. Anyway. But after the zones are figured out, then the airship captain gets to place the support ship where they want. And then we go on to the tank phase. The very first thing you have to do in the tank phase is pay water. If you don't pay water, you get a water and then immediately end your turn. Don't be in that position where you need to do stuff during this phase and can't do it. But here's all the things you can do. You can buy a tank from the local tank market. So depending on how many players are in the game, more players means the tank market starts out cheaper. Otherwise, to buy a local tank, you spend the cost. So the cost is out of sight, sadly. It starts out at 13. Eventually makes its way to like 15, 17, 20, 22, and then out of stock. But to buy a local tank, you'll spend that many credits, and you'll spend a water, and you'll put the tank where you have a zone. A basic tank produces water, and it requires energy to run unless you have it on the water space, which requires no energy to run and gets you water, which is nice. A Option for modifying your tanks. So options for modifying your tank. So an energy converter, which requires no energy to run, obviously. It costs 2. Energy is nice because in order to actually run each of your tanks, you're going to need that energy. And it's also critical for making carrier upgrades. So having a decent supply of energy is nice. The market has a lot of room for energy as well. So I think it's rare that anyone's ever in a position to really need energy too badly. So this market is usually kind of in the low end of price until people actually need energy for some reason. The other converters include the ore converter. Ore converters require energy and produce ore. Ore is critical for also making carrier upgrades and superchargers and your luxury quarters. Yeah, it's worth noting the luxury quarters card is actually misprinted. It's supposed to be quartz and ore. Let me put water instead. The ore market is eh. I mean, in general, well, one of the things that happens with the ore market and energy markets is producing more tanks. So that's one of the things that keeps those kind of busy. So there may be some room to make some money in the ore market. And also the highest capacity for any airship is ore at like 14. That's level 4. And the ore converter costs 5. I believe that the energy one costs 2. And then the quartz converter, which is the most expensive one, costs 8. It produces quartz. So quartz is critical to getting an imported tank because sometimes the local market is stupid expensive. And or it's sold out and you just really need a tank. But depending on how much quartz is worth, that's a very pricey tank. Quartz is needed for a supercharger as well. Supercharger is another modification. A modification that requires water, ore, and 2 quartz. But it increases the capacity. It increases the production level of your tank by 1. And it's worth points at the end of the game. There are only 13 superchargers. So get them before they're on. Quartz is also needed for buying a building license and making luxury quarters. Quartz has like the more lucrative market, but if you ever like need to buy it, it's a market that's got to run out quick if people actually need it. But there's room for the price to go really high. Yeah. So yeah, getting a tank, getting a converter, getting a supercharger, and a carrier upgrade. Okay, so the carrier upgrade costs an energy and an ore, and it lets you go from level 1 to level 2, 2 to 3, or 3 to 4. Anything you produce in excess of your capacity is just lost. There's no side place to hold on to it somewhere. It's gone. And then, once you do all your stuff, you can also rearrange tanks, converters, and superchargers. There's one variant that makes your tanks have to stay where they are, but you can otherwise move other stuff around. You can always take a converter off of a tank if you really don't need to make that anymore. Something you want to keep in mind with the tanks you have producing stuff of the same kind is you want to have a cluster of tanks together that are making the same thing, because that will come into use in the resource phase. So let's go right into it then. Once you've done your tank phase, the first player's done their tank phase, and the second, and so on. Then we'll go to the resource phase, where players will get the resources. So, in order to use the tank, you need energy unless it creates energy. If it is a water tank on a water space, it does not take energy. But once you've paid the energy for the tanks you can run, you'll get the things for them. Anything you can't run is set to the side for the time being. It won't produce, it won't contribute to synergy. So let's say I spend the 3 energy that I need to run these 3 tanks. I get the 3 water. Synergy. I get 1 less than the number in that cluster of the same type. They're all making water, so I'm getting 2 more water. So it's a total of 5 water. And then anything in the support airships row produces 1 more. So there's 6. If I had a supercharger on one of them, I'd get another one. So there's 6 water that I don't have room for. If I had thought about it, what I would have done is make sure to upgrade my capacity for water at a time. Because, yeah, you want to be thinking ahead of time of what do I need to have room for on my airships to do what's gonna be important later. So once you've got your resources, we go to the buy and sell resources tab. For each resource, each player in order will buy or sell that resource. So starting with the first player, starting at quartz, because it's number 1. They can either buy quartz or sell quartz. If you buy more resources than you can carry, they are just thrown to the reserve and the supply is unaffected. And they don't get... Yeah. However, if you sell, you can continue selling even when it's maxed out. It's just going to be crashing the price. And then once you buy or sell, we look at where it is on the supply to the price adjuster, and we adjust the price accordingly. So here it is 6 credits to buy or sell quartz. If I buy quartz, the price is going to go up. If I have quartz to sell and I sell enough of it, the price is going to drop. Yeah. Once I'm done with quartz, the next player goes, so on until all the players gone. Then it goes to the ore, and through all the players again, the water, all the players, energy, all the players. There's a variant that lets you reorder reorder which way they're done, because that might have an effect. You can also pass as well. And then once everyone's done, we go to buy-sell certificates. You can either buy a building license, sell a building license, or buy 1 luxury quarters. Again, They're limited. Get them before they're gone. And then we go to the end step where we produce new tanks. So we look at how much ore is left, how much energy is left, how much room is there in the market for tanks. And we look at the lowest number. So there's currently room for 5 new tanks. There's 6 ore, and there's 9 energy. So that's 5. So what we do is check the whole tank market. Yeah. Yeah, so either the market maxes out, the ore hits 0, the energy hits 0. So the market will end up at 5, going up 5, and it will drop 5 on those markets. Now, if one of these were at 0 before trying to produce anything, what would happen is the price of that resource immediately goes up by 4 ore spaces. Yeah. I forget what screw it. Right at the end. Almost. And then once the tanks are produced, we go to maintenance. Players advance them around marker. So the fewer the players in the game, the longer the game goes. But eventually the marker will hit here and it'll be the end. If it's not the end of the game, then the specialist cards are returned and the support airship is removed. And that's pretty much it. There's advanced rules. There's stuff to do the neutral claims differently. There's leaving out the die for zone claiming, which is kind of nice. There's optional cards like price manipulation, sabotage, or freelance carrier. For a tougher game, there's reduced starting resources and credits. There's having to leave your tanks where they are. River production limits that you can only get water or energy, and you can't have no ore, no quartz. Yeah, the variable trading order we've already gone over. Yeah. Let's see here. Anything else? Tank supply reserve, resources, and supply. It's possible for the supply to get on the market track exceeds the number of plastic tanks. If this happens, supply for tanks is equal to the number of tanks in reserve. And player removes the tank supply marker, only tank price changes. So eventually they'll get to a point where there's only so many tanks left, and that maxes out the value. But yeah, that's Planet Steam. Just a game of trying to think ahead, invest in what you think is going to make the most of the market, and just trying to build up your presence out here. Yeah, the big thing is zone, tank, supercharger, luxury quarters. That's your big points right there. Being smart with your money is also a critical strategy, and holding on to resources with the hopes that the market will be up at a price that they're worth holding on to is the other critical strategy. This is Fantasy Flight's edition of a game from quite some time ago, and it is an excellent game. Why do I love this game? Because I love business, because I love crazy stuff with just messing with markets and all that. This is a game I probably give somewhere. It is right on the edge of absolutely positive. What do I have any issues with? It's like there's this, but we can leave it out. That's always an option. I guess you know what it is absolutely positive. My feelings for it. It's just a nice game. These plastic pieces for the tanks, the converters are so nice. And again, my one gripe with the game is there's exactly 20 of the ones. In a 5-player game, you're going to have to be on the ball, making change as much as possible. Ones. But otherwise, it's. I want to say the game might be a bit on the lengthy side. It's not something for newer players. I don't know. I don't know how to estimate newer players sometimes. They kind of. You never know what a new player is going to see in a game and notice first and think, oh, this is something I could pay attention to and do something about. This is something that I think is going to work. And a good percentage of the time, they're freaking right. But this might be right on the threshold of new gamers and experienced gamers for getting people to play it. This is, if I'm playing in the next board game league, this is one I'm definitely going to bring. For sure. It might be a bit on the, might be a little more time intensive than some of the games we've done, but at least the game freaking ends. The game has a clear time limit that eventually it's going to come to an end. And knowing that helps with planning as well. Is there anything else? Gripe-wise. I mean, it helps having the whole diagram of setups for not messing with anything. But at the same time, I want to do more with experimenting with the variable clay marker setup, because being able to just do away with that and actually just be able to place these wherever as part of a strategy is more to my liking, I think. But yeah, Plant Steam. This copy was not that hard to find, thankfully. It's a reasonable price. I'm not sure what other copies are floating around, but try not to pay too much for it. I want to say the previous cost for the game was somewhere around the $50 to $60 line, but if you can get cheaper than that, go for it. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.